Oh man, I'll tell you the truth. I am really enjoying talking about what I've been sharing with you for the last couple of weeks. I know that the messages have not been what we call evangelistic messages, but most of y'all have heard that all your life anyhow. Right now, brothers and sisters, you need to know what's going on in your world that you live in. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about disaster by design. I think you heard that on the radio last Sunday, if you weren't here. Last week, we talked about the emergency powers of the President of the United States, which aired this morning on the radio. Today, I want to continue in the same vein so that we as Africans can catch up to what's going on in our society. I want us to come up to speed to what's going on around us. So today I want to tell y'all really what they have been holding back from us and totally misdirected our minds into thinking something other than what really is. Today I want to talk about this subject. Who really owns and runs America? Who really owns this country? Who really runs this country? I know a lot of people think that the president does. A lot of people think that Congress does. A lot of people think that the House and Senate, which comprises Congress, I know they think that these lawmakers run the country. Brothers and sisters, I got news for you today. These people are nothing but pawns in what is called an international game of chess. Now, those of you, let me see the hands of those of you who know how to play chess. Let me see your hand. All right, well then y'all really grab right quick what I'm talking about. Those who don't know how to play chess, let me tell you, chess is a game of strategy. And in order to hope to win, you have to have some sense of strategic idea and planning. Let's talk first of all about the forms of government. Now I'm telling y'all right now, before we go any further in the message, I'm going to be doing some educating here today, okay? How many of y'all have ever heard the word Democratic before? All right. How many of y'all, by the way, in here Democrats? Let me see your hand. All right, I see some hands. How many of you ever heard the word Republican before? How many of you are Republicans? Let me see your hand. All right, mostly Democrats. Isn't it deep that most black folk are Democrats? And it's really deep because I don't think any of us really know why. But I'm going to help you understand today what that's really about. There are various forms of government, brothers and sisters. But basically, they come into two categories. Everybody say, rule by God, and the other is rule by man. Now, the first form of government, as we just said, ruled by God, is called a theocracy. Coming from the word theos, theocratic, meaning it is a government by immediate divine guidance. Under the category of rule by man, there are various forms, and I'm going to try to touch on those today. The first form of government, theocracy, ruled by God, whether we want to admit it or not, we virtually have no control, brothers and sisters, over the theocratic form of government. This is God's decision. God is the one who determines this type of government depending on her plans. Y'all heard what I said, right? I said her plans. See, ancient Africans understood that the creative force was considered the mother goddess creative force of the universe. This his idea is something that we learn from the patriarchal concept and chauvinistic mind of the European man. But since we're still in there, I'm trying to kind of help us develop into an awareness of, so we say his, her, or her a lot. Being that the theocratic form of government is determined by God, it really doesn't make much sense for me to even discuss that form of government because it's not a viable alternative. There are various forms, however, of man-made government. Some of the more common types are, everybody repeat after me, where no one rules. Where no one rules. That's the first. The proper word for that is anarchy. When nobody rules, that's called an anarchy. In an anarchy, you have what is called lawless confusion, disorder, chaos, and turmoil. That's in an anarchy. Then you have another type of government where one man rules. That's called a dictatorship or a monarchy. In that you are liable to see what's called unlimited rule. You're liable to see something called tyranny. You're liable to see what might be referred to as a totalitarian government, wherein coercion is used to rule the people. The other type of government is where a few people rule. The proper word for that is oligarchy. O-L-I-G-A-R-C-H-Y. In an oligarchy, you have what's called a small elite group of people that rules the masses. The nobility group exercising control, and usually it's for corrupt and selfish reasons. Then you have a type of government called where the majority rules. That's called a democracy. Y'all have heard of that before, right? Yes. For you Democrats. Yes. Okay. A democracy. That consists of what is called constitutionally elected representatives. A democracy is a form of government that is traditionally controlled at the top by a small ruling group of people, or oligarchy. The people in a democracy are conditioned to believe, follow what I'm saying to you people, the people in a democracy are conditioned to believe that they are indeed the decision-making power. Yes. Did you hear that? Yes. But in truth and in reality, the people are not the decision-making power. It's that small group of people at the top that makes all of the decisions for the masses. In a democracy, they lie to you and tell you go vote. And the masses go vote thinking that in what's going on. When in reality, after you vote, it's still that small oligarchy at the top that makes the decisions. So the only true form of government throughout history has been the oligarchy, or that rule by a minority for the majority. In the 1928 United States Army Training Manual, what year did I say? 1928. Yes. The 1928 United States Army Training Manual defines a democracy as, and I quote, a government of the masses, Authority derived through mass meeting or any form of direct expression. Sometimes, follow this good now, sometimes this definition results in what is called a mobocracy. A mobocracy. M-O-B-O-C-R-A-C-Y. You'll understand what it is. And that is actually a word. Look it up in the dictionary. A mobocracy is often confused for a democracy. The only thing, mobocracy is the mob. Oh yeah. When the mob rules, what do we mean by the mob? When you got a group of people who are unruly, lawless, and confused, that constitutes what is called a mobocracy. I'll spell it again for you. M-O-B-O-C-R-A-C-Y. The attitude in a mobocracy is that the will of the majority or the mob shall regulate based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, or without restraint or regard to consequence. There's another form of government that protects both the minority and the majority. It's called a republic. Now I asked how many Republicans were in here. I didn't see all any hands go up. Well, let me tell you about the republic. Republic defined by law is one or entity that is ruled by the law. A republic in the Republican form of government, the power rests not in the majority, the power rests not in the mobocracy, but the power rests under the Republican form of government in a written constitution, wherein the powers of the government are limited so that the people retain the maximum amount of power themselves. So in other words, under the Republican form of government, it has nothing to do with how many people are on your side. It has to do with what does the Constitution say. In addition to limiting the power of government, care is also taken to limit the power of the people to restrict the rights of both the majority and the minority. For example, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example here of democracy, republic, mobocracy. How many of y'all have ever seen a cowboy pit? Anybody watch westerns? Okay, you've seen them, I'm sure. Whether you like it or not, I'm sure you've seen what I'm getting ready to tell you. Here's the story where this bad guy comes into town. Okay? And what he does when he gets into town is he guns down this poor, unobtrusive merchant by provoking him into a gunfight. You ever see that in the you know, you're going to draw, or either draw on the count of three, or I'm going to shoot you anyway. One of them kind of things. So this poor innocent merchant is out there trying to draw on this gunslinger villain. And the villain shoots him in cold blood, as they say. Now, the sheriff down the street hears the gunshot, and he comes running to the scene, and he asks the crowd, what happened? So the crowd tells the sheriff, this man shot this man in cold blood. He wasn't doing anything. He provoked him into a gunfight and killed him. What does the sheriff do? The sheriff arrests the gunslinger, take him down the street, and lock him up in the jail, right? That's what happens, right? Y'all gonna talk back to me? Right. All right. Now, back at the scene of the shooting, a particular individual who wants to call himself the speaker for the crowd starts telling the crowd, we need to take the law into our own hands. And we need to go down to the jail and bust him out of jail and lynch him. You've seen that type of setting, right? God knows it happened to our people enough times, and we had done nothing wrong. So, because of the influence of this brother who stood up to convince the group they to go take the law in their own hands, they all start deciding that this is the course of action that they should take. Now notice, the group now becomes a democracy. Okay? Because the majority of the people decided we need to go lynch this guy. Y'all with me? All right. Now what happens is as they go down the street, they start hollering and screaming and yelling and everything. Now the democracy becomes a mobocracy. Y'all following this thing now, right? They reach the jail and the sheriff comes out and says, what's going on out here? Now this democracy, which has now become a mobocracy, demands that the sheriff let him go so we can lynch him. The sheriff says, regardless of how many people are standing out there, the sheriff says, it's my duty to protect this man and see to it that he gets a what? Fair trial. The reason for that is because the sheriff is enforcing what is known as the Republican form of government. If it was a Democratic form of government where the people majority rules, the sheriff would have to let him go and they would lynch him. Well, the sheriff tries to show the people the law, and eventually the people realize that the sheriff is right, and they disperse and they go home. At least that's the way it ought to turn out. The Republican form of government has triumphed over the Democratic form of the mob action. Ooh, buddy, I tell you, there's another situation in the Bible of Republican form of government. Y'all been reading it all the time, didn't know it. There was a guy in the Bible, in the biblical text, called Jesus. And he had been arrested. And the Republican form of government was to see to it that he gets a trial. But the mob, the Democratic form of government, convinced Pontius Pilate to wash his hands and say, okay, I tried to institute the Republican form of government. Y'all insist on doing it y'all's way. Here, take the man. And what did they do? The mob took him and did what? Crucified him, right? Y'all forgot the story? Y'all ain't that far liberated, are you? It's easy, brothers and sisters, to see how a democracy can turn into a mobocracy of angry individuals if not careful. Who owns this government? The Democratic Party? The Republican Party? I got news for y'all today. There was this guy from England named Lord Halifax. I don't know why they decided to call themselves Lord and Duke and all that kind of stuff, but Lord Halifax of England said, and I quote him, "They who are of the opinion that money will do everything may very well be expected to do everything for money." You got that? I'll say it again. They who are of the opinion that money will do everything may very well be expected to do everything for money. Now, I just told y'all the whole message. I just told you the whole message. I just told you why everything that's been happening in the last few weeks has been happening. You see, people, with money comes power. Now, for the unscrupulous people, nothing will stand in their way to achieve the ultimate in power. Such people are driven by greed. Now, Don't interpret what I'm about to say as a racist comment. I'm just telling you the truth in what I'm about to say. It's no secret, people, that banking and the Jew go hand in hand. Did y'all hear what I said? Now, I have to be honest with you. The Jew, actually the imposter Jew, the Edomite, is uniquely gifted for commerce, business, sales, investment management, anything having to do with the money end of things attracts a significant segment of this clan called the Jews. You take names such as Rothschild, Baruch, Kuhn, Loeb, Warburg, Morgan, Goldman, Sachs, Greenspan. I knew that one would get you. Volcker. All of these names are readily recognized by the world of finance, not only in history, but even to the present day. One of the most influential forces in the government is the oil banking complex. Now I'm going to drop stuff on y'all that our folk just ain't used to hearing. Now I'm going to tell you why we're not used to hearing it. Let me break away from my notes right quick, tell you why we're not used to hearing it. You know why? Because all we're used to hearing is what we hear at work, what we hear at church, and for those of you who still go to the bar, what you hear in the bar, or what you hear in the beauty parlor, or the barbershop. That's the realm of our experience as a people. And unfortunately, the one place that most of us go where we ought to be taught, most preachers ain't doing it. So we're stuck right where we were. Oh, come on, people. Do an inventory of yourself. And ask yourself the question, okay, I'm 35 years old, been in the church all my life. What am I learning at this point in my life that I didn't learn at 5 years old? Ask yourself that question. If you can't add any more than you learned your first 5 years of Sunday school, then you need to get your tail up out of that place and go somewhere where you can learn. I know, I ain't talking to y'all, I'm talking to folks looking at me on television. Everybody say this: big oil, and big banks, spell big trouble, for the world. Now I want y'all to see how this thing is working, people. What happened in New York a couple of weeks ago? What tragedy happened? Y'all tell me. World Trade Center was destroyed, right? The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center was destroyed. And you know what they told us? They told us that the Arabs did this. They told us that Muslims did this. That's what they told us. But nobody ever asked, why would Arabs want to do that? Hey, why? Why would Arabs want to destroy the World Trade Center? Because they're terrorists. And that ain't answering the question. Because I don't know any terrorists greater than the United States of America. I don't know any. I mean that. What would make them, the Muslims, destroy? So we got to look. Everybody say this: we must learn, to see the reality, behind the appearance. Did y'all grab that? We must learn to see the reality behind the appearance. It should come as no surprise. Now, brothers and sisters, hear what I'm about to drop on y'all. This thing is deep. I'm a little tired today because I didn't get much sleep. This thing had me so charged, I didn't go to bed till almost 5 o'clock this morning. Just preparing this message because it's that awesome. Check this out. 2 of the 10 largest banks in the world are affiliated with 12 oil companies. I'm going to talk slow so you can do the math now as I speak. 2 of the 10 largest banks in the world are affiliated with 12 oil companies. Those 2 banks are Citicorp and Chase Manhattan Bank. These banks, follow this people, these banks have become tightly woven and interwoven with OPEC. Now, for those of you who don't know what OPEC is, OPEC, I'm sure you might have heard it, it stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. In other words, these are the countries that got the oil. Now, because of this, it's only natural, follow this people, it's only natural that these United States banks, if all of your money in the bank is from an OPEC country, who is your allegiance going to be to? The United States or OPEC? You got that right. So what we're dealing with here is these United States banks don't have an allegiance to the United States, but rather to the international community. Now, let's create a hypothesis, even though it's not far from a hypothesis. Did you hear what I just said? All right. Just suppose that OPEC decided to pull its money out of United States banks. Now, if they pull out every cent deposited in big United States banks, it would spell disaster for this country. Well, like I said, it ain't that far from a hypothesis. OPEC had planned to do that. Now you understand why, when George Bush came into office, the first person he immediately had a meeting with was Alan Greenspan, the director of the Federal Reserve. You see, they had to talk about how they're going to compensate for all of this money being snatched out of United States banks. Y'all with me? Yeah. Y'all ain't getting scared on me now, are you? Okay, all right. Now, it's difficult for us to understand just how powerful these oil countries and international bankers are in terms of wealth. But you got to understand something, people. Y'all ever hear the phrase say, money talks? Yeah. In the end, it ain't got nothing to do with your patriotism. Now, when it comes to banks, banks are in the business of making money, not being patriotic. And it's money that talks and motivates and controls the actions of nations. I'm going to blow y'all's mind with this. 90%. What did I just say, people? 90% of OPEC's money is on deposit in United States banks. Now see, we can't relate to that because most of us broke. The most we can do is try to get some kind of an imaginative idea of what we're talking about here. But when I say 90% of OPEC's money is on deposit in the United States Bank, I'm talking about over $1 trillion. I didn't say millions. I did not say billions. I said over $1 trillion is on deposit in major United States banks by OPEC countries. Yeah, buddy. Now, so you'll understand how this works. It's deep here because the OPEC countries got their money on deposit in the United States, but the United States is not a member of OPEC. Y'all starting to see the problem now, aren't you? What countries are OPEC members? Algeria, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait. Now you want to know why we've been doing so much bombing? Libya, Nigeria. How many of y'all have heard about the shell situation going on in Nigeria with the Ogoni people there? Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela. These are all OPEC countries. Now, mind you, brothers and sisters, hear what I'm about to tell you. Saudi Arabia by itself is the nation with the most deposits in United States banks. Saudi Arabia has the most investments in commercial real estate in this country. Saudi Arabia has the most investments in United States government securities. Now, how did the United States allow itself to get in this predicament? How did that happen? Well, you got to understand. Let's go back and let's do some history here. In 1973, the OPEC nations raised their prices some 400%. I don't know how many of y'all remember the gas crisis back then. Now, you got to understand, money started, falling in on them people because we paid the prices. The oil, their income soared from $29 billion in 1973 to $100 billion in 1974. Oil that sold for $2.59 a barrel in 1973 was suddenly selling for $10.95 in 1974. Now compare $10.95 in 1974 to today. Imagine how much higher it is now. You don't have to, if you don't know what that, just compare your gas and heating bill today to what it used to be. Now, with such a windfall in billions of dollars, these Arabs didn't know what to do with their money. They're sitting around meeting, what shall we do with our money? So guess who ran to their aid? The United States government. The United States, because of their greed, said, we'll tell you what to do with it. Put it in our banks. The United States rushed over and talked them into putting it in their banks, and suddenly, banks that used to be nationally minded are now called international banks. And they became internationally minded. And with this lust for money and their newfound pot of gold at the end of the Arab rainbow, the big banks urged the United States government, now follow this thing, people, the big banks told the United States government, don't oppose OPEC. Don't fight it. They want to raise their prices, don't y'all say nothing. Let the people complain, but y'all better not complain. Yeah, buddy. Oh, people, this thing is deep. By 1985, the Arab oil-producing bloc of nations had, now notice I said, by 1985. By 1985, the Arab-producing country, oil-producing countries had deposited $1 trillion in United States Bank. This is 2001. Now here's the problem, y'all. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few big banks in the United States, whose ultimate power is or may be held by Middle East nations, spells control. Dig this, as I told you, 90% of OPEC's oil money has been handled by 6 banks in the United States. Now, when I say this, it's going to really blow your mind. 6 banks in the United States have handled over 90% of OPEC's oil money, and 5 of those banks is in New York. And where you think those 5 banks are? World Trade Center facility. Making sense now? See, here's the problem, people. This is the type of control that determines who's going to become the president of this country. It ain't your vote. I'm trying to tell you that. Y'all run out here and getting upset because they ain't counting your vote. If they did count it, it wouldn't matter. They're going to do what they want to do anyhow. This is the type of control that sets and determines the limits of power. This is the kind of control that could strip away any limits of power and make possible a dictatorship. This is the kind of control that's paving the way for a new world order and also a new marking system, which the book of Revelation calls the mark of the beast. Now, if you just look back in history a little bit, you can get an inkling of what I'm talking about. What happens when an oil-producing company decides to withdraw their money from the United States? Well, in the fall of 1978, now mind you, it didn't happen. It was just rumored that it was going to happen. Somebody put out the rumor that Kuwait was getting ready to withdraw $2 billion from the United States. Well, if they had done that, it would have caused the stock market to crash and all that kind of mess. Such a withdrawal would have caused financial panic in this country. And the administration of that day, and by the way, the president at that time was a man known as James Earl Carter. Y'all know him as Jimmy Carter. James Earl Carter, President Jimmy Carter, check this, people, quickly bought up $30 billion worth of dying US dollars on the world market in order to stabilize our predicament. That's why these presidents leave office with such gray hair. When it turned out that Kuwait was not withdrawing its money, it was only a rumor, the rumor touched off near financial disaster in this country. On November 14, 1979, Iran announced, what country did I just say? Iran announced that it was going to pull its billions of dollars from the United States. Same president, President Jimmy Carter, acted quickly, and guess what Jimmy Carter did, y'all? He declared a national emergency. Now, why did he do that? Follow this. Jimmy Carter, when Iran announced it was pulling its money out of the United States banks, Jimmy Carter declared a national emergency. And you know why he did that? Because the only way that he could freeze Iran's assets, we had to be in a national emergency. Y'all getting this picture now? You can't just go freeze somebody's assets. You have to be in a national emergency to do that. So now here, OPEC, not just Iran, but OPEC period, is saying we're taking our money out of the United States. If they did that, this country would shut down. Everything would stop. Your lights would go, I mean, this whole country would shut down. And I'm going to tell you why the country would shut down. Because this country, is in debt to something called the Federal Reserve. I'll teach on that in another lecture in a couple of weeks. Help you understand that that green stuff you got in your pocket is not money. It's a note. It actually says it across the top. Federal Reserve note. I'll teach on that later. So you understand, you can see how big oil controls big banks and how the two in concert will control the United States economy, and not only the economy, the elected leaders as well. Just for the sake of research, y'all don't have to take my word for what I'm saying. Write this down. Write this down. Write this word. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now see, how many of y'all remember Desert Storm? Okay, I don't know if y'all ever thought about it, but how in the world are we going to get oil from Arab countries if we're at war with them? Think. So what the United States did is they created this entity called Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That is the oil that we have, or this country has, in reserve while the Arabs and us ain't getting along. While OPEC and us ain't getting along. So that, y'all understand what I'm saying? And of course the prices are very, very, very high, because that's reserve. And we have to be careful how we use it. Write this down. Al Gore. Have y'all ever heard of him before? Al Gore and big oil companies. Go to the internet and look it up. Let me tell you what you're going to find right off the bat. The Gore family empire. What did I just say? Gore family. See, people, it ain't about just Al Gore running for president. The Gore family empire holds about $500,000 worth of stock in this company called Occidental Petroleum Corporation. That's why Al Gore wanted to be president. Al Gore wanted to be president because if we had elected him president, yeah, he would say to all of these oil OPEC, y'all get out of here. I got my own oil company. Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, referred to in the 1700s, talked about this thing. In protocol number 2, it states, and I quote, "The administrators," check this out people, "whom we shall choose from among the public, with strict regard to their capacities for servile obedience, will not be persons trained in the arts of government, and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius, who will be their advisors, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the world." That's protocol number 2 of the Protocols of Zion. How do they manage to get such control over the elected officials? Well, you got to understand something. There's an elite power group. Everybody say Committee of 300. I'm going to send y'all on a research project, okay? I'm going to send y'all on research. Don't just stand up and take my word for this. Y'all go do what I did. Do some homework. Write that down, Committee of 300. Write it down. Pull it up and go read about them. Write down this word, Bilderbergers. Write it down, the Bilderbergers. Go see the influence of Bilderbergers. That's B-I-L-D-E-R-B-E-R-G-E-R-S. Council on Foreign Relations. Y'all ever hear that? Why y'all think they talking about sending Jesse over to talk to these people? You got to understand something, brothers and sisters. Jesse Jackson is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's not just a black man. Somewhere along the line, he lost his focus for African liberation. There was a time when Jesse had an afro with a dashiki standing there talking about black power. Now he done became a member of their program. I pray to God prevent that from happening to me. I'm serious. I mean it. See, you know what happens? People like myself, what they do is they look into your background. And if you got any dirt in your closet, they'll come to you and say, listen, here's what we got on you. Now, you either work for us and do what we want you to do, or we're going to expose you. If you don't have your dirt in your closet, you know what they do? Then they come to you and try to buy you. They come to you and offer you a cabinet position somewhere or an ambassadorship in some country that don't even exist. Have you walk around, you know, see, that's what happened with Andy Young. I don't know if y'all remember this. See, soon as they killed Martin Luther King, next thing they did was made Andrew Young an ambassador. Had to buy the man out. Members of this international power elite, the Trilateral Commission, the Illuminati, they have the power, brothers and sisters, to directly influence the federal and executive branch of government in ways that nobody else can even come close to. That George Bush father got on television talking about, I don't know what's going on. I just came to check on my son. I don't even realize, ain't nobody keeping me abreast of nothing. Liar! Every time the boy gets ready to make a decision, he pick up the phone, Daddy? What do you think I should do, Daddy? Because he's carrying out his father's agenda. What he's dealing with, his father started when he was in the Oval Office. Even politicians with the best intentions and the strongest of wills find themselves virtually helpless against the massive political influence of the financial banking cartels. The power elite are able to influence the federal government through three basic processes. I don't have time to go through all three of them, but the first one is called the candidate selection process. Now see, this is deep, people, because one of the reasons why I have a problem with voting, personally, is because they won't let me select who I want to run for president. They want me to elect who they select. You understand what I'm saying? And as long as you don't have the power to select, but only to elect two of who they selected, you still a slave. Did that make sense, people? In other words, what they do is they go select two of their boys. And they put both of their boys out here and say, all right, public, now y'all choose which one you want. What difference do it make? Both of them belong to you. The candidate selection process, though the members of the power elite attempt to influence the electoral campaigns by means of finances in the form of large campaign donations, that is the real entity that we have to contend with. In the political system of the United States, the emphasis of elections is not, follow me people, it's not the policies of the political party or the candidate, but the personal image and attributes of the individual candidates. For all intents and purposes, hear what I'm about to tell you. Go do your research, prove me wrong. But for all intents and purposes, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party doesn't even exist. That's just a lie to make the public think they got something to say with what's going on. You hear what I'm saying? One elitist says it this way. Man who's a banker that I knew from New Jersey. He said, the best form of government is to make people think they have a say in what's going on. Isn't that deep? Because if people think they have a say, they'll get more involved and support the program. That's the lie. That's the deception that they give us through what is called the voting process. There are only individuals, candidates, and professionals, consultants, builders, so forth, contractors, doorbell ringers, media advisors. That's all they're concerned with. They're not concerned about somebody who really wants to come in and do the right thing. The reason why the American political system can be in good part dominated by the members of the power elite through large campaign contributions is because the candidate selection process in the American political system is so individualistic and therefore dependent upon name recognition and personal image. So big donors and big fundraisers are held. Y'all be surprised how much money Ronald Reagan made to become president of the United States. Y'all be surprised how much money George Bush made to become president of the United States. And of course, all this money is under what is called campaign contributions. For example, Ronald Reagan in 1966, just after he became governor of California, this company called 20th Century Fox. Y'all ever hear that before? It's a movie conglomerate. 20th Century Fox purchased several hundred acres of his land adjacent to their outdoor set in Malibu. Check this out now. They purchased several hundred acres of his land for $2.8 million. Triple what it was worth. Okay? What's really deep about it is right now to this day, that land ain't got nothing on it but wild grass and trees. Never used the land. But it was money that went into his pocket. $2.8 million for a piece of land they ain't doing nothing with. See, they had to give a reason for giving him that kind of money. So they say, we bought his land. And then they arranged it to where he got $20,000 per appearance just to go around and do speeches at different businesses. That's big money, y'all. Every time he went to speak at a dinner or a banquet, he got $20,000. Oh, come on, y'all. Shucks. I wish. Now you see why Jesse tried to run for president, don't you? Shucks. Making that kind of money. Ain't gonna let no black man have that kind of money, though, y'all. Then there's the special interest process. Let me close by going to this last point, the policy-making process, through which the general policies of the policy-making network, which includes organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, are brought to the White House and Congress. The policy-making process is not as well known or studied as the other different processes used. It appears to be as detached from day-to-day events as special interest programs, completely immersed in them. It appears as concerned with fairness and the national interest as the special interest process seems biased and self-seeking. You ever hear words like nonpartisan? Objectives? These are catchwords that they use to describe the organizations involved, and many of its members show their disdain for really helping the public. Brothers and sisters, we are dealing with a situation here where money controls it all. If OPEC is getting ready to pull that money out of the United States banks, and I'm talking well over $1 trillion, isn't it sad, but yet it's realistic, that this government would say 5,000 people just got to die 6,000 people just have to die. It's easier to kill 6,000 people than to have them take $1 trillion out of this country. In other words, it takes a heartless people to come up with that. But again, brothers and sisters, back what I said last week, it's called crisis creation. You see, people, again, and by the way, in case y'all didn't know it, Bush just so happened to have frozen the bank accounts of these OPEC countries. How do you freeze the bank account except you must create a crisis? Why would anybody want to crash planes into the World Trade Center? You see, in police work, we have this thing called, well, they have this thing, I ain't in it no more. They have this thing called motive, opportunity. All that stuff plays an important part here. What would be the motive of Muslims crashing a plane into the World Trade Center? For what? Ain't got no motive. Because y'all are the devils in the world? Well, heck, we've been devils in the world for the longest. Something had to happen to cause such a tragedy. So, we must stage an event that will be so monumental that it will give the president the privilege and the opportunity to create Emergency War Powers Act. And when the president does that, what does he do? The first thing he does is he goes and freezes these people's assets. You can't pull your money out of this country. And the real tragedy here, people, is innocent people, innocent Americans, are parading down streets, holding signs up, talking about no war, peace, peace, no fear, no fear. We don't want to go to war. That's all a smoke screen. But it's deep that when you put human life into a smoke screen to cover your filthy agenda. Who really owns and runs America? The people who got the money. And I want you to know the United States ain't the people. We are broke as we can be. The United States has been broke for a long time. That's why Alan Greenspan is such a powerful man. Alan Greenspan said, y'all need some money? Fine, I'll print up some more money. But you gotta understand, I'm gonna put interest on every, I'm gonna put 32-cent interest on every dollar I'll print up for you guys. So that means every dollar bill that they print, the United States owns the Federal Reserve 32 cents on it. Where are we gonna get the money from? Where were they gonna get $40 billion from? Y'all see our predicament, people? Now that you're, I hope you've learned something in this. Now that you've learned something, go educate others. Because we got ignorant black folk who love their president and are ready to go die for a heartless people. And I know what I'm saying is dangerous, but I got to tell the truth. See, you know it's amazing, y'all. All my life I was raised saying stuff like, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go. If the Lord wants somebody, here am I. Oh Lord, send me. And all my life, even though I was singing that, the only thing I was going forth and telling was the program that they had programmed into me to program into you. And guess what? That's not dangerous. Of course, you get rich doing that. But that song has meaning when it says, Lord, I'll go telling the truth even if they don't want to hear it, even if it costs my life. We even say that. Even if it costs my life, Lord, I'm going all the way. Shucks. And we some chicken-hearted folk. I'm a soldier in the army of the... What's your warfare? Look at the person next to him and ask him, what is your warfare? Since you're such a soldier, what have you been warring against since you're a soldier? Got my war clothes on. And as soon as somebody lie on you, you're ready to give up. Yeah, buddy. They talk about me. Oh, brothers and sisters, I tell you.